The gunshot cracked through Millfield's morning stillness as sheriff. Braxton Voss kicked down the door of the old Hartwell mansion, his badge gleaming against the dust-filled sunbeam.
Us.
Inside, a girl with copper hair and defiant green eyes pressed herself against the far wall, while Cornelius Grimm fumbled for his derringer with shaking hands. "Step away from her," Grimm Braxton growled. His Colt .45 trained steady on the portly merchant who'd been terrorizing the town for months. But it wasn't the standoff that made Braxton's heart slam against his ribs. It was the way the girl, barely 20, with fire in her emerald gaze, looked at him like he was salvation incarnate. 3 weeks ago, he'd watched helplessly as her father, desperate and drowning in gambling debts, had sold her to Grimm in what the town called a debt arrangement. The law, corrupt as morning coffee left too long on the stove, had deemed it legal. "You got no right, Sheriff," Grimm wheezed, his jowls quivering. "She's mine, fair and square. Bought and paid for." The girl, Isolde, he'd learned her name, was spoke for the first time since he'd arrived. "I never agreed to this." Her voice was like honey poured over broken glass, sweet but sharp enough to cut. Braxton had been losing sleep over her for weeks, patrolling past this house every night, listening for screams that never came, but fearing they would. He'd fallen for her the moment he'd seen her in the general store, laughing with the baker's wife before her world came crashing down.
Oh.
The law's the law. Grim, but kidnapping ain't legal nowhere, Braxton said, though they all knew the truth. 1847. A woman's choices were slim as winter kindling. Grimm's laugh was ugly as a buzzard's cry. "Kidnapping? She ain't been harm done yet." His eyes slithered over Isolde like oil over water. That was when Braxton noticed the bruise purpling her left wrist, shaped like thick fingers. His trigger finger twitched. "You laid hands on her. She tried to run. Had to teach her some manners." Grimm's confidence was returning. Fed by the knowledge that half the town council owed him money, Isolde stepped forward, chin lifted in a gesture that made Braxton's chest tighten with something fiercer than desire. "Sheriff Voss, I've been trying to tell anyone who'll listen, my father had no right to sell me. The debt was his, not mine. Of course he had the right," Grimm spat. "A man's got to cover his debts with what he's got. She's all he had left worth anything." The words hit Braxton like a slap, but what cut deeper was seeing Isolde flinch as if struck. He'd seen her father, Josiah Reeve, stumbling drunk through town for weeks after the transaction, hollow-eyed and mumbling about having no choice. "Maybe so," Braxton said carefully, "but battery's still a crime in this county." Grimm lowered his derringer with a smug smile. "Touch of discipline ain't battery, Sheriff. Ask any married man." That's when Isolde did something that changed everything. Looked straight at Braxton and said, "Then arrest us both." The words hung in the dusty air like smoke from a funeral pyre. Braxton's gun wavered slightly as he tried to process what Isolde had just said. "What?" Grimm's face went pale as milk left in summer sun. Isolde stepped closer to Braxton, her bare feet silent on the warped floorboards. "If I'm property, as you claim, and he's my owner, then we're both guilty of conspiracy to defraud the territorial government." Braxton's mind raced. She was brilliantly desperate, but brilliant nonetheless. "How's that, Miss Reeve?" "Property taxes," she said, her voice gaining strength like a creek after spring rain. "Mr. Grimm here hasn't registered me with the county assessor. Haven't paid property tax on his ... acquisition. That makes him a tax evader." Her green eyes flashed toward Grimm. "And if I'm truly property, then I'm guilty of conspiracy for not reporting myself." Grimm's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. That's the most ridiculous ... "Is it?" Braxton found himself playing along, though his heart hammered against his ribs like a caged bird. Territorial law is mighty specific about property registration. Judge Wickham's been cracking down hard on tax evaders since the territorial governor's visit last month. The truth was, Braxton was improvising, but he'd spent enough time studying law to know that bureaucratic tangles could bind a man tighter than iron shackles. More importantly, he could see the desperate hope flickering in Isolde's eyes. "You can't arrest her," Grimm protested, sweat beading on his forehead. "She's mine." Then you should have registered her proper, Braxton said, warming to the deception. As it stands, you're both in violation. Miss Reeve, you'll have to come with me. Isolde nodded gravely. I understand, Sheriff. I'm prepared to face the consequences. Of why? Unlawful status. As Braxton moved to escort her toward the door, Grimm grabbed his arm with surprising strength. Wait just a damned minute. You can't take her. Why not? Braxton shook him off. You just spent 10 minutes telling me she's your property. Property gets confiscated pending tax hearings all the time. But. Of course, if you want to contest this in court, that's your right, Braxton continued, enjoying the panic spreading across Grimm's face. Judge Wickham loves a good property dispute, especially when it involves questions about the legality of selling human beings in the United States territory. Grimm went quiet as a grave. They all knew Judge Wickham had strong opinions about slavery, even the unofficial kind that happened when desperate men sold their daughters to pay debts outside. The morning sun hit Isolde's copper hair like liquid fire. She walked beside Braxton with dignity and tact, though he could see her hands trembling slightly. The whole town would be watching by now. News traveled faster than wildfire in Millfield. That was quick thinking back there, he said quietly as they approached the jailhouse. I've had 3 weeks to think, she replied. 3 weeks of listening to him talk about his rights over me. Figured if I was going to be treated like property, I might as well use property law to my advantage. Braxton opened the jailhouse. Door then hesitated. Miss Reeve, I want you to know, ... that you're not really arresting me. She smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her since this nightmare began. I know, Sheriff, but we both know Grimm's not going to let this go. He'll be back with half the town council before sunset. She was right. Grimm had money, influence, and the law such as it was on his side. This desperate gambit had bought them time, nothing more. Then we better make good use of the time we've got, Braxton said. Inside the jailhouse, Isolde refused the cell, choosing instead to sit in the wooden chair beside Braxton's desk. Sunlight streamed through the single window, painting golden squares across the rough-hewn floor. You know this won't hold, she said, tracing patterns in the dust on his desk. Grimm's probably already on his way to Judge Wickham with a pocket full of silver. Braxton poured coffee from the pot that had been brewing since dawn, offering her a cup. The warmth of her fingers brushing his, as she took it, sent electricity up his arm like lightning hitting a church steeple. Maybe, he said. Got principles money can't buy. Every man's got principles until they're tested by the right amount of coin. Her voice carried the bitter wisdom of someone who'd learned hard truths too young. Not every man. Braxton settled into his chair, studying her face in the morning light. 3 weeks of worry had carved lines around her eyes that shouldn't be there for another 20 years. Tell me about your father's debt. Isolde's laugh was sharp as winter wind. What's to tell? Daddy always said he'd strike it rich someday. Been saying it since Mama died when I was 12. Started with cards, moved to dice, then began betting. On everything from horse races to weather patterns. When gold fever hit last spring, he borrowed against our land to fund a prospecting expedition. Found nothing but fool's gold and empty promises, I'm guessing. Worse, the expedition never happened. Daddy drank away most of the money, lost the rest in a poker game with Grimm and his friends. When collection time came, she shrugged. But Braxton could see the hurt bleeding through her composed facade. He had a choice, Braxton said quietly. Men always have choices, do they? Isolde set down her coffee cup with deliberate precision. When Grimm came calling with his offer, Daddy was 3 days away from losing everything to the bank. Our house, our land, everything Mama left us. At least this way, he said, I'd have a roof over my head and food on my plate. Kind of. Roof? What kind of food? Braxton's voice hardened. I've seen what Grimm does to the girls who work his saloon. Color flooded her cheeks. He, ... He, Hasn. Too. We haven't. She took a shaky breath, said he was waiting until I got used to the idea. Said breaking a wild horse to fast ruins the ride. Braxton's coffee cup hit the desk hard enough to splash brown liquid across his papers. He was on his feet before he realized he'd moved, rage coursing through him like poison in his veins. Son of a sheriff. Her voice cut through his fury like a blade through silk. Getting angry won't change what's already done. But looking at her, really looking, Braxton could see what the past 3 weeks had cost her. The proud set of her shoulders couldn't quite hide the way she flinched when footsteps approached too quickly. The defiant lift of her chin couldn't mask the shadows under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and constant vigilance. "It changes what happens next," he said. Before she could respond, the jailhouse door burst open. Deputy Fletcher Kane stumbled in, his hat askew and his usually askew, neat shirt wrinkled. "Sheriff, you got trouble coming," Fletcher panted. "Grimm's got Mayor Ashford and 3 council members heading this way. They're madder than wet cats, and talking about jurisdiction and proper procedure." Isolde stood, smoothing her simple brown dress with hands that barely trembled. "It was a good try, Sheriff Foss." "Sit down," Braxton said. "We're not done yet." "Braxton," Fletcher said, his voice dropping to urgent whisper. "They got papers. Legal papers. Judge Wickham signed an order transferring Miss Reeve back to Grimm's custody pending a proper hearing on the tax matter." "When's the hearing?" Fletcher's silence was answer enough. "There's no hearing scheduled, is there?" Isolde asked. "Judge said the tax issue was ... creative, but not sufficient grounds to interfere with a legitimate debt arrangement." Braxton felt the walls closing in, but he wasn't ready to surrender. Not when Isolde was looking at him with those green eyes that held too much resignation for someone. "Barely 20 years old, and we'll make our own jurisdiction," he said. The sound of approaching boots on wooden boardwalks grew louder, punctuated by Grimm's wheezed complaints and Mayor Ashford's pompous declarations about law and order. Braxton moved to the window, counting 5 men, including Grimm, all marching toward his jailhouse with the determination of pallbearers heading to a funeral. "What do you mean, make our own jurisdiction?" Fletcher asked, his young face creased. With worry, Braxton turned to Isolde, who was watching him with an expression caught between hope and disbelief. "Miss Reeve, do you trust me?" "With what?" "Your life, your freedom, everything." She studied his face for a long moment, and he could almost see her measuring him against every disappointment life had already handed her. Finally, she nodded. "Then, we're getting married. Right now." Fletcher dropped his hat. Isolde went pale as fresh snow. "What?" she whispered. "Territorial law's clear on this," Braxton said, his mind racing through half-remembered legal precedents. "A married woman can't be held responsible for debts incurred before marriage. And a husband's got legal standing to challenge any contracts involving his wife made without his consent." But we barely know each other," Isolde protested, even as color began returning to her cheeks. "I know enough." Braxton moved closer, close enough to catch the scent of lavender soap despite her 3 weeks of captivity. "I know you're braver than most men I've served with in the war. I know you've got a mind sharp as a cavalry saber. And I know I've been half in love with you since I first saw you laugh at something Mrs. Patterson said in the general store." "Sheriff," Fletcher interrupted, "they're almost here. And even if you could get married right now, Grimm's still got legal claim until... not if she's already married." Braxton pulled a folded paper from his desk drawer. "Wedding license, signed and filed with the territorial recorder 3 days ago." Both Fletcher and Isolde stared at him as if he'd grown a second head. "How?" Isolde breathed. "Filed it under emergency territorial provisions. Said the bride was in immediate danger and standard waiting periods would put her life at risk." Braxton's smile was grim. Wasn't lying about that part. The footsteps were on the porch now. Through the window, Braxton could see Grimm's red face and Mayor Ashford's impressive belly straining against his vest. "Isolde Reeve," Braxton said formally. "Will you marry me?" "This is insane," she said, completely. "We don't love each other yet." "Sure." "Risking your career, your reputation? Worth it." The door rattled under someone's heavy fist. Mayor Ashford's voice boomed through the wood. "Sheriff Voss, open this door immediately." Isolde looked at the door, then at Braxton, then at Fletcher, who was watching this unfold with the fascination of someone witnessing a train wreck in slow motion. "If we do this," she said quietly, "there's no going back. I know. Grimm won't just disappear. He'll fight this. Let him fight." Another round of pounding, more insistent now. Grimm's voice joined the mayor's. I got legal papers, Sheriff. You're interfering with lawful property recovery. Isolde straightened her shoulders, and Braxton saw steel flash in her green eyes. Fletcher, are you ordained? What? Well, yes, actually. Got ordained by mail order to perform my cousin's wedding last year, but then perform ours. Now. The door burst open just as Fletcher began stammering through the opening words of a wedding ceremony. Mayor Ashford's purple face appeared in the doorway, followed by Grimm's furious scowl and 3 council members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. What in tarnation is going on here? Ashford demanded. Wedding, Braxton said calmly, taking Isolde's hand in his. You're just in time to witness. The small jailhouse erupted into chaos. Mayor Ashford's face progressed from purple to an alarming shade of crimson, while Grimm pushed past him, waving his legal papers like battle flags. You can't do this, Grimm shrieked. She's mine. Got papers. Had papers, Braxton corrected, not releasing Isolde's hand. Fletcher, continue. Poor Fletcher looked like a man caught between a charging bull and a cliff edge. Do you, Braxton Voss, take this woman? This is illegal, Mayor Ashford thundered. Sheriff, you're clearly not thinking straight. Step away from the girl and we'll forget this nonsense. Isolde spoke up, her voice carrying across the din like a church bell. Do you, Braxton Voss? Take me, Isolde Reeve, to be your lawfully wedded wife, in sickness and health, for richer or poorer, till death do us part. I do. His answer was steady as bedrock. You can't. Grimm lunged forward, but Council Member Tobias Whitmore caught his arm. Hold on, Cornelius, Whitmore said, his lawyer's mind clearly working. If they're actually married, they're not. Married until I say they're married, Mayor Ashford declared. And as the highest elected official in Millfield, I'm declaring this ceremony null and void. Actually, Fletcher said, finding his voice and some courage. Territorial law says any ordained minister can perform marriages. Don't need mayoral approval. Isolde turned to face Fletcher directly. Do you, Isolde Reeve, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do. The words came out stronger than she'd expected, carrying weight that surprised even her. Then by the power vested in me by the Colorado Territory and the Universal Church of Spiritual Enlightenment. Fletcher said, speaking faster, as Grimm made. Another lunge toward them. I pronounce you husband and wife. Braxton kissed her then, quick and gentle, but with a promise behind it that made her heart skip. When they broke apart, the room had gone dead silent. Well, said Councilman Jeremiah Cross, breaking the silence, that's that then. That's not that, Grimm's voice cracked like a boy's. She was legally mine. You can't just marry someone else's property. Property can't give consent to marriage, Braxton said. And she just did, publicly, with witnesses. Mayor Ashford gathered himself like a man preparing to charge a cannon emplacement. This is clearly a sham marriage designed to circumvent legitimate business arrangements. I'll have it annulled before sunset. On what grounds? Whitmore asked, his legal curiosity overriding his political allegiances. Fraud? Duress? All eyes turned to Isolde, who stood a little straighter, her hand still in Braxton's. Nobody coerced me, Mayor Ashford. Sheriff Voss asked me to marry him, and I said yes. You said yes to avoid your legal obligations to Mr. Grimm. I said yes, because I wanted to. The strength in her voice surprised everyone, including herself. Because marrying a good man who treats me with respect seemed preferable to being owned by one who doesn't. Grimm's face went ugly. You little watch? Your mouth, Braxton said quietly, but with enough steel in his voice to stop Grimm mid-word. You're talking about my wife. The word wife hit the room like a thunderclap. It was real now, official and binding, witnessed and recorded. Isolde felt something shift inside her chest, a loosening of tension she'd carried for 3 weeks. Counsel. Member Harrison Burke, who'd been silent through the whole affair, finally spoke up. Cornelius, seems to me you've got a choice. You can fight this marriage in territorial court, which will take months and cost more than you paid for the girl in the first place. or you can cut your losses and walk away." "Walk away?" Grimm's voice was incredulous. "I paid good money?" "You paid for a debt settlement," Burke replied. "Debt's settled now. Girls married to the sheriff, and territorial laws clear about married women and prior obligations. Besides," Whitmore added with a slight smile, "think about the precedent you'd be setting if you won. Every unmarried woman in the territory would know that marriage isn't enough to protect them from debt collectors." That'd make a lot of fathers. And husbands mighty nervous. The political implications hung in the air like smoke from a poorly tended fire. Even Mayor Ashford looked thoughtful. "This isn't over," Grimm snarled. But the fight had gone out of him. Braxton said firmly. "It is." As the crowd dispersed with much grumbling and dark looks, Braxton found himself alone with his new wife and a bewildered deputy. The late morning sun slanted through the window at a different angle now. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. As if the world had shifted on its axis in the space of an hour. "Well," Fletcher said, breaking the awkward silence that was ... something. Isolde sank into the chair beside Braxton's desk, the magnitude of what had just happened settling over her like a heavy quilt. "What have we done?" "Got married," Braxton said simply, though his own mind was reeling. "Fletcher, I need you to ride to the territorial capital. File our marriage certificate with the main registry and pick up any legal precedents about debt obligations and married women. Right now? Right now. And stop by Judge Wickham's office. Tell him I'd be obliged if he could review the Grimm situation when he has time." After Fletcher left, the jailhouse fell quiet except for the distant sounds of Millfield going about its daily business. Isolde stared at her hands that now wore no ring but belonged to a husband she'd known for all of 20 minutes. Of actual conversation, you realize she said finally that people are going to talk. Let them talk. I'll say I seduced you. That I'm a scheming woman who trapped the sheriff into marriage. Braxton pulled a chair closer to hers and sat down. "We'll say a lot of things. Most of it will be wrong, will it?" She looked at him directly. "How do you know I didn't plan this?
Oh.
How do you know I wasn't manipulating you from the moment? You kicked down Grimm's door?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Braxton considered it seriously, studying her face in the morning light. Finally, he smiled. "If you were that calculating, you wouldn't have suggested arresting us both for tax evasion. You'd have found a way to make me think it was my idea? Despite everything," Isolde felt her lips curve upward. "Maybe I did make you think it was your idea. Maybe you did." His smile widened. "Wouldn't be the worst thing, being outsmarted by my wife." The word wife still felt strange, like trying on clothes that didn't quite fit yet but might, with time and patience. Isolde had never imagined her wedding day would involve a jailhouse, a deputy ordained by mail order, and an audience of hostile town officials. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we figure out how to be married." "You make it sound simple." "It is simple. It's not easy, but simple." Braxton leaned back in his chair. "We treat each other with respect. We try to be honest. We see if what's between us can grow into something real. And if it can't..." The question cost her something to ask, but she had to know. She'd been sold once already. She needed to understand the terms of this new arrangement. "Then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it," Braxton said. "But Isolde, I need you to know something. What happened here today, it's not a business arrangement. It's not a convenience. I married you because I wanted to, not because I felt. Sorry for you. You barely know me. I know enough to want to know more." Through the window, they could see people going about their daily business. But Isolde noticed the lingering looks, the whispered conversations that stopped when the speakers noticed her watching. By evening, every soul in Millfield would know the story or some version of it. "Where will I live?" she asked practically. "I've got a house. Small but clean. 2 bedrooms, he added quickly, color rising in his cheeks. 2 bedrooms. When you're ready. If you're ever ready," he cleared his throat. "We don't have to rush anything." The kindness in his voice nearly undid her. After 3 weeks of Grimm's leering suggestions and crude comments about her duties, Braxton's consideration felt like water in a desert. "I have nothing," she said quietly. "No clothes except what I'm wearing. No money, no belongings." Grim burned everything I owned, said I wouldn't need reminders of my old life. Rage flickered across Braxton's features, quickly controlled, but not before she saw it. We'll get you what you need. With what money? Sheriffs don't exactly get rich with wedding money. What wedding money? Braxton's grin was sudden and boyish. The money Grim's going to pay us to settle this quietly. 3 days later, Isolde stood in the parlor of Braxton's small house, wearing a new blue dress purchased with Grim's wedding gift, a sum he'd paid to avoid having his business practices examined too closely by territorial authorities. She was arranging wildflowers in a mason jar when she heard Braxton's boots on the porch. "How did the meeting go?" she asked, as he came through the door, noting the satisfied expression on his face. Better than expected. He hung his hat on the peg beside the door and kissed her cheek, a gesture that had become natural over the past few days. Grimm's decided to relocate his business interests to Denver. Seems he's heard there are better opportunities there. Better opportunities or less legal scrutiny. Same thing in his case.
Braxton settled into the chair across from her, studying
her face. "How are you feeling about all this?" It was a question he asked daily, as if checking the weather. Over the past 3 days, they'd fallen into an easy rhythm of morning coffee, evening conversations, and careful exploration of each other's boundaries. She slept in the smaller bedroom. He took the larger one. They shared meals and stories, and tentative touches that spoke of growing affection. "Better," she said honestly. "Stronger. Like myself again. Only more so. More so. Before all this happened, I was just Josiah Reeves' daughter, waiting for life to happen to me." She set down the flowers and looked at him directly. "Now I'm Isolde Voss, and Isolde Voss doesn't wait for anything." The sound of his name on her lips still made something warm unfurl in his chest. What does Isolde Voss do instead? She makes things happen. Isolde moved to the window, looking out at the small garden behind the house. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about needing help with the territorial law research, and I want to do it. Not just help with it. I want to learn it, really learn it, be studied to become a legal clerk, or even a lawyer's assistant." Braxton joined her at the window, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "That's a big ambition for a woman in 1847. Good thing I married a sheriff who's not afraid of big ambitions." He turned to face her, and she was struck again by how seriously he took her ideas, how he listened as if her thoughts mattered as much as any man's. "You know it won't be easy. People will have opinions. People have had opinions about me since the day I was born, at least. Now there'll be opinions about something I chose to do." She met his gaze steadily. "Besides, I have an advantage other women don't." "What's that?" "I have a husband who believes in me." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning that went beyond mere professional support, for the past 3 days. They'd been dancing around the growing feelings between them, both afraid to name what was happening for fear of breaking the fragile trust they'd built. "Isolde," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something." Her heart skipped, but she kept her voice steady. "What?" "That first day, when you asked if I barely knew you, you were right. I knew your smile, your laugh, the way you helped Mrs. Patterson carry groceries when her arthritis was acting up. But I didn't know who you really were." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I do now. And what I know is that I don't just want to be married to you. I want to love you. I want you to love me back. Braxton, ... I know it's not what we agreed to. I know we said we'd see if feelings could grow naturally. But mine aren't growing anymore. They're already grown. Full-sized and permanent and so strong, they scare me sometimes." Isolde felt tears prick her eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. For the first time in her life, someone was choosing her, not out of desperation or convenience, but out of genuine affection and respect. "I'm already there," she whispered. "Have been since yesterday morning when you brought me coffee in bed because you heard me coughing and thought I might be getting sick." "Yesterday morning?" His smile was incredulous. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I wanted to be sure. Because I've never been in love before, and I wasn't certain I'd recognize it when it happened." She reached up to touch his face, marveling at the right she now had 2 such gestures. but I am certain now. I love you, Braxton Voss. Not because you saved me, but because of who you are when you think no one's watching. Because you treat Fletcher like a partner instead of just a deputy. Because you read law books by lamplight, trying to find ways to help people the system has forgotten. He kissed her then, properly this time, with all the tenderness and passion he'd been holding back. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. So, he said against her forehead, "What do we do now?" "It's now we live," Isolde said simply. "We build something real together. Study law and fight injustice and raise children who know their mother and father chose each other out of love. Children. Eventually, when we're ready, when you're ready. I'm ready for anything, as long as it's with you." Outside, the sun was setting over Millfield, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Inside the small house on Maple Street, Sheriff Braxton Voss and his wife Isolde began planning a future that neither of them could have imagined a week ago, a future built on choice, respect, and a love that had grown from the most unlikely, beginning into something strong enough to last a lifetime. 6 months later, when Isolde passed her exam to become the territory's first female legal clerk, Braxton was in the front row cheering. And when their first child was born 2 years after that, old-timers still talked about the day the sheriff married a girl right out from under Cornelius Grimm's nose. But Braxton and Isolde never talked about those early days as a rescue or a convenience. To them, it was simply the story of how two people found each other in the most unlikely place and built something beautiful from the courage to say, "I do," when the world expected them to say, "I can't." Love, as it turned out, was the most powerful jurisdiction of